Hello all, good morning or good evening. Welcome to Lunch and Learn Marathon, and welcome to this session on Explore RBAC and PIM in Microsoft 365. So whenever we are working with Microsoft 365 environment, we are dealing with so many users, so many resources inside Microsoft 365. And then once it comes to more resources, more number of users, we have different roles which each user performs on their own on various resources inside Microsoft 365 as well as Microsoft Azure. So in order to set the governance rules or compliance, RBAC, that means role-based access control, as well as PIM, that means privilege identity management, plays an important role in this entire life cycle. So in this session, we are going to explore what is mean by RBAC, PIM, and then how we can make use of those on a day-to-day kind of an examples by which we can bring more governance, more compliance, and more security to our Microsoft 365 environments. So the agenda for this session is we will see how we can manage the user identities from both Microsoft 365 as well as from Microsoft Azure. And then we will deep dive into the concept of role-based access control, how we can implement those, and then how we can use those in our day-to-day life examples. And then we will look into the principle of least privileges, why it is important, and then how we can implement those principles of least privileges. And then we will deep dive into the privilege identity management team by taking some real world use cases, like how we can create our own PIM, and then how we can use that to carry out most of the scenarios which are common for most of our circumstances. Before that, a quick introduction. Myself, Nandadeep Nachan. I'm Microsoft MVP for Office Apps and Services, Microsoft Certified Trainer, mostly working on SharePoint, Office 65, and Microsoft Azure. Author of a couple of books on SharePoint Hybrid as well as SharePoint Framework. And on to the right hand side, here are a few social handlers to get in touch with me. And with me today is Smita.
Hello all, I'm Smita Nathan. I'm from Pune, India. Greetings. And I'm a Microsoft MVP for Office Development category. Apart from that, I am a Microsoft certified trainer. I am author of SharePoint Hybrid book. And these are some of my social handlers by which you can get in touch with me. So now let's see how we can manage user identities. So everything in this Office 65 starts with user identity. So Microsoft is promoting a term identity. In the past, we deal with the term user account. The term user identity fits well with modern standard when we have moved to cloud for managing the accounts. So Microsoft have redesigned their directory service based on web standards. So for example, Microsoft Azure Active Directory. And in Microsoft 365, we have users and we have our enterprise resources in terms of apps and services. So users need to use these resources to perform their task. But every user in the organization cannot have access to each resource available in the enterprise. And it is obvious, and to handle this, we have the policies. So with policies, we can define who can access what, and this makes us up to the identity of the user. And that means as a user, which resources he or she can utilize by respecting the defined policies. So there are multiple ways to manage the user identities. Azure Active Directory Portal gives us more option to manage the identities. On the other hand, Microsoft 365 Admin Center provides more user-friendly options which are more easier to use. So now let's see demo. So now we can see the demo how to manage a user identity. So once you go to the Azure Active Directory associated with your tenant, so from the user tab, you will able to manage all the users. So from here, you can create a new user or you can invite the other external guest users. Once we clicked on a new user, you have to specify username and domain. If you have a multiple domains, choose that domain. Then after that, you have to provide a first name, last name, and then here we have a groups and roles. So wherein we can select the groups that the member should be part of and what role should be that particular user. So we have many roles here. And the next thing is the settings. Yeah. So there is a block sign in. Yeah. So block sign in is used when we want to create a user in advance, but we don't want to enable it. For example, let's say in your organization, you are expecting a user to join on a certain date. So what you will do is you will go ahead and create that user, but you will block the sign in access so that when that user will join your organization, you will allow user to sign in until the time you will block that user sign in access. Yeah. So the next thing is usage location. So while creating any of the user in Office 65, we need to set this usage location. So this one is the must. Here they don't have a required field denoted, but this is the must have field. Then we can provide a job title and department as a option. And we can go ahead and we can create a user. So this is how a user creation works from Azure perspective. Again, if I select anything of the existing user from here, and let me select one of the existing user. Yeah, so I can set the multi-factor authentication or I can reset a password also for it. So this is the one example of how you can just creating of the user. So now let's look at the another experience and now let's go to Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So this is another place from where you can create the user. So from the ref layer, you have to go to the users, then you have to click the active users and then click add users. And after that, you have to provide the details for all the options over here. So if you compare this experience with what we had in Azure, this one is much smoother experience. So wherein you just have to give the username, first name, last name. So this is a very simple wizard. And once we add a first and last name, it will auto populate the display name and it wasn't there in Azure. Then you can assign the username and password in a setting. So you can auto generate a password also, or you can create the password. You can do it as per your business requirement. So next thing from here itself, you can provide the licenses to the user. So let's say, for example, if I want to assign Office 65 E5 licensing, and then I can assign optional app licenses to the users also. The next thing in the optional settings, we can either give this user admin access. So from here, we are deciding we want this user to be a normal user or administrator kind of an user. Then once we click the next, you can click a finish, adding a button, and then user will get created. So from both the interfaces, it will create the user, but depending on what kind of more functionalities you want to perform, you can choose either Azure portal or Office 65 admin portal. When you're kind of an advanced user and you want to assign a roles, then set the MFA right at the creation of the user, then go to the Azure portal user creation. So for example, if you are kind of a non-advanced user or kind of a basic user who just got something to do with the user administration, so in that case you can go with Microsoft 365 user creation. So it's about the user creation, how can create a users with the both the ways as per your business requirement. So next thing is let's see about this RBAC. So what is the RBAC? So RBAC is a role-based access control which helps you to manage who has access to your organization resources and what they can do with those resources. So RBAC allows an administrator to grant other users' privileges to perform the task. RBAC can be considered as a permission scheme wherein we allow administrators to perform a certain operations while denying them to perform other operations. So now let's see what are the rules. So the rules are used to assign a rights based on the principle of RBAC, that is the role based access control. So that means give the access to the resources based on the role of user. So there can be a multiple roles assigned to an individual users. So for that demo, let's go to the Office 65 Admin Center. Yeah. So we have a roles menu available right inside Microsoft 365 Admin Center so that we can manage the roles from here and instead of going to Microsoft Azure portal. So from Microsoft 365 Admin Center, you can see all the available roles. So once you click any of the role from here, you can add a user to this role. Also see the permissions included in this role. So on the other hand, if we go to the Azure portal, so under the role and administrators, you can also create a new custom role. Yeah, so this is about this RBAC. So now let's go back to our slide. A role defines the set of permission granted to users assigned to that role. So you can use both the built-in and the custom roles. So roles allows us to define what privileges user is getting. Over the time, Microsoft has added many granular rules to help the administrators to limit the privileges of the users. So this helps to keep in control the security risk and achieve the principle of least privileges. So one thing you have to note that Microsoft recommends no more than 5 global administrators even for large organizations. So there are some of the rules later on Microsoft introduced, which is the global reader. So you can view admin features and settings in all admin centers. So with the role-based access become available, we can create a role specific to a certain functionality. For example, Exchange admin, compliance admin, guest inviter, and many more. To help assist the global administrator at the same time ensure that they will not have any additional roles apart from their designated responsibilities to avoid any possible security breaches. Once we talk about Office 65, we have our Office 65 tenant. In that, we have a multiple services, including Word Online, Excel Online, PowerPoint Online, OneNote, Outlook, SharePoint, OneDrive, Yammer, Team, Sky for Business, Exchange, and many more. So what happens is everything is start with the user. So we have multiple users who are part of our Office 365. Then we have something called as roles, and role defines what a user can do. So each user got one or more roles assigned to them. Then the major part is the permission. So the permission defines which roles can perform what operations on the available resources. So we have those roles mapped to the permissions, and then we have those permissions assigned to each of the resources inside Office 65. So this way we are able to control the role based access because each user is a part of one or more multiple roles, and that role has got specific set of permission with which we are able to perform only certain operations inside a Office 65. Without or in the absence of role, everyone would have got every access to Office 65, which is not preferred way. So this is how the roles help us to define the access control. So now let's see how practically we can implement RBAC. So let's go to Office 65 portal. So we will give you here two example. So the one example is you have to assign a licenses to SharePoint users. So one way is to go to the users and then go to the active users and click any of the user and click licenses and app, and from here you can assign licenses and apps. But one drawback is here that you are not able to track who has got the license, and again any of the other admin can give the user access and we will not able to track that. So the best way is go to your Azure portal and then go to the groups. So let me go to already created SharePoint access group, and here if I go to the licenses, you can see we have added only SharePoint. So any of the users that we add as a member or owner to this group will automatically get this license. So after adding a user, that user will able to access the SharePoint. So this is the one best example if you want to provide your user licenses only for a SharePoint. So instead of provide them a direct access from Microsoft 365 Admin Center, you can add your users in Azure group and from Azure Active Directory Admin Center. So the second example is in Azure Active Directory Admin Center. We have created one group called as Allow Group Creation. Let me open that. Yeah. So with the pandemic situation, there is a huge demand for Microsoft Teams, and then Microsoft Teams gets created very frequently. And we want to have some control that a certain set of users should be able to create the teams and not all the users. So that what we will do is we will create a one group. So if you want to go to the basics of Microsoft Team, so the Microsoft Team is based on Office 65 groups. So we cannot directly control who can create a Microsoft Teams, but at least we can control who can create the Office 65 groups. So for that purpose, we have created one group called as Allow Group Creation. So only member from this group will be able to create the groups, and in turn they will able to create the Microsoft Teams. So for that purpose, we have a PowerShell script, and using that PowerShell script, we can give a rights to this group to create Office 65 groups and in turn Microsoft Teams.
All right. So even taking the example of first group again. So if I can go back to my Azure subscription, if I go on to the groups, and here we do have one group created as SPO Logical Access, SPO Logical Access Management Security Group. So that means all of the users who are part of this particular group, they will be only able to access SharePoint Online. Because what generally happens is that once we create a user inside Microsoft 365, we can keep assigning licenses to them, and then we won't be able to track who has got license to which service inside Microsoft 365. So to bring the governance around this scenario, what we can do is we can create a group, and then once we create the group, during the group creation, we can just mention all of the owners and members for this group. And then just to take it one step ahead, we can again go back to the Azure Active Directory, and from here we can just click onto the security portion. So under security, we do have something called as conditional access, and using that conditional access, we can create a policy and we can apply that policy on top of that group. So only the users who are part of that particular group will be able to access SharePoint online service and not the other members. So what happens is from here we can create a new policy. So probably I will just open up the policy which is already exist or which is already created here. So we have got one policy created as SPO access. So let me just open that. So what happens here is that under the users and groups, we can specify like which users to include and which users to exclude. So in the exclude section, we are excluding this group which we just had created for SharePoint Online Logical Access. And then what we can do next thing is in the Cloud App and section, we can just include Office 365 SharePoint Online service here, so that all those licenses will be only applicable for this particular group for this particular service. And then we do have a condition here. So in the condition, we can include like which apps to include, or even which locations to include, even any of the device platform to include. So at least in this case, we are keeping it very simple, and we are configuring the client app to be included for any of the browser, mobile apps, even the Exchange active sync clients, as well as any of the other clients. So we are allowing user access from any of these applications or any of these locations. Again, we can go ahead and we can configure any of the user risk, sign-in risk, any of the device platform, or any of the location or any of the device state, whether it is compliant or non-compliant. Once it is done, what we can do is we can grant the access by at least having the grant access or block access. So what we are doing here is we are setting it to block access. So with these conditions set, what can happen is that we are excluding all of the other users apart from this group which we have included to access SharePoint Online service. So in turn, what happens is that only users who are part of this particular group, they will be able to access SharePoint Online and not any of the other users inside our organization. And then just make sure that you enable this policy by selecting on. For example, if you set it to report only or off, this policy will not get applied. So let's see like how this policy work. So for that purpose, I will again go back to my Azure Active Directory, and I will go back to the groups. And then let me again go back to the group we created earlier, which is SPO Logical Access Management Security Group. If I go to the members of this particular group, I just have two members specified here. So let's see like how it works then. So right now I have been logged in with this admin user. So what I can do is from here, I can just try to open up any of the SharePoint site. So once I try to open, I'm able to open this particular site because I'm a part of this particular group. So in the another instance of browser, I am logged in with another user called as Debra, and you can see that this user is not part of this logical access management group. So let's see, for example, if this particular user tries to open up SharePoint site, what happens? So let's say he has got any of the SharePoint site, and then he tries to open that. So in that case, he get some kind of an error message saying that you cannot access this right now. And if you read out this carefully, it says that your sign-in was successful, but it does not meet the criteria to access this particular resource. So for example, this particular user might be signing from a browser, app, or a location that is restricted by the admin. So for example, if you get such a kind of error, how can you resolve these errors? Okay, so what we will do is let's say this particular user reports that I'm not able to access SharePoint Online, and then what could be the causes of that? So again, I'm moving back to my admin user who is the global administrator. I'm again moving back to my Active Directory. I will click on users from here, and I will select that particular user who is facing that issue of not able to access SharePoint Online. So from here under activity, I can click sign-ins, and under the sign-ins, I should be able to see all of his signing attempts for last 24 hours, or even I can go beyond that. So at least here I can see few of the success as well as few of the failure attempts of this particular users. So maybe let's open up this and try to see what happens. So even from here, we will be able to see that there is something wrong with this conditional access policies, because of which this particular user is not able to get into that particular service. And if you want to get more details about it, you can click this conditional access, and from here you can see the result column for the specific conditional access policy, which is restricting this particular user from accessing that service. And clearly from here we can see that this is the policy which is restricting that particular user to access SharePoint Online. So once you click that, this will again give you more information about what thing has been matched, because of which this particular user was not able to access that particular resource. And from here, what we can do is we can open up that particular policy, try to see what has been conditions which are enabled onto this particular policy, and then we can add this user as a part of that policy, and from there this particular user will be able to sign in to that particular app or service. But this is how this RBAC is powerful, by which we will be able to restrict the logins for our users, and then we will be able to restrict like what kind of an applications or services these users can use or these users cannot use. So that was all about these roles and RBAC, like how we can use Microsoft 365 admin portal as well as Microsoft Azure to create our custom roles, and then how we can set up this process of RBAC through which we can control the access for each of the user to specific apps or resources inside Microsoft 365. All right, so with that, let's move ahead with the principle of least privileges. So what is mean by principle of least privileges is that it is just kind of an idea that any user should have only bare minimum privileges necessary to perform its function. So for example, if I want to add a user inside my organization, in that case, for example, if I just have the user admin kind of an access, I should be able to create that user, but not necessarily I should have the global admin access by which I will be able to create the user. Because for example, if someone gives me global admin kind of an access, then yes, I can create the users inside our organization. But what happens is that apart from that, I do get some more privileges by which I can be a potential risk to the organizations, because I can go beyond the assigned capabilities for me, and then I can do any kind of an malicious activity within the organization. So this is mean by the principle of least privileges. So always give the privileges which are required, a minimum privileges which are required for a user to perform their work. So the principle of least privileges works by allowing only enough access to perform the required job. Following the principle of least privileges reduces the risk of attackers gaining access to the critical system or sensitive data. And then again, let's say, for example, there might be few scenarios that wherein we want some kind of an access for some time by which we will be able to perform that activity, but not necessarily that particular user should have that rights for the entire life cycle. All right. So what we can do in that case? So to answer that, we have the privilege identity management or PIM. So what is mean by PIM is that it allows you to manage, control, and monitor access to the important resources inside Azure AD, Microsoft Azure, as well as Microsoft 365 services. So we can manage, control, and monitor access to any of the resources. So then again, why to use PIM? So organizations want to minimize the number of people who have access to secure information or resources, because it reduces the chance of a suspicious user getting that access or an unauthorized user accidentally impacting any kind of an sensitive resource. However, users still need to carry out privilege operations in Azure AD, Azure, Microsoft 365, or any of the SaaS-based apps. So organizations can give users just-in-time privileges access to Azure resources and Azure AD using this PIM. So for example, let's say I want to add few users to the directory or to this organization. What can be done is that I will be given that particular access for some time. When that time span will come, I will get that rights to add the users to the organization. Then I can go ahead, add the users. And when that particular window will lapse, I will again lose my rights, and then I won't be able to perform those administrative operations. So this is the concept behind PIM. So just to get into the overview of PIM again, from here we will be able to manage, control, and monitor access to all of the resources inside Microsoft 365. And then it provides just-in-time privileges access to Azure AD and the Azure resources. So that means only when needed, I can go perform the activity. after the time has lapsed, I won't be able to perform those extra or those admin kind of an privilege activities on my own. Thirdly, that we can assign the time-bound access to resources using the start and end dates. So that means we can just have time-bound access to those resources. Saying that, let's say tomorrow there will be few people who will be joining the organization, and then to get their accounts created, I should have some kind of an rights by which I can go ahead, add them or create those users, add them to specific groups and everything. In that case, even though I'm not the user admin or a global admin, I will get that particular access for some time. During that time, I can go there, perform those activities, and then once that time bound has lapsed, I will again lose my accesses. Okay. Thirdly, that it does require approval to activate those privilege roles. So what happens is that I will request the global admin to give me some kind of an rights, which I won't be able to perform with the current um, privileges that I have. So I'm requesting some kind of an more privileges to be given to me by the global admin. So the global admin can give that, but there will be an approval. So before I go ahead and perform all those activities, there will be an approval needed from the global administrator, so that I can perform that privilege kind of an role. And then even we can enforce the multi-factor authentication to activate any kind of an role. The multi-factor authentication here is very much important from the security point of view, because for example, if any of the user account has been compromised, and if that particular account has got some more privileges inside the organization, we should be able to restrict that, maybe using this multi-factor authentication. So all of the accounts or all of the accesses which are kind of in privilege accesses, we can enforce this multi-factor authentication before they can go ahead and activate any kind of an role. So this will add some more kind of a security on top of PIM. And then again, we need to have the justification to understand why users will need to activate that particular access. So there should be always a justification to say, like, why do you need those privileges and for what duration you need those privileges. And then we can get the notification when these privilege roles are activated. So for example, I'm just maybe the help desk admin, and then I want to go ahead and maybe add some users. I will request for the user admin kind of an access, and then I will get the notification when that request is approved, so that I can go ahead and perform that activity. Again, there will be the access reviews. Those should be conducted to ensure that users still need those roles. So what happens is that maybe the global admin can give those accesses, but again, if you forgot that we have given maybe this kind of an access to any of the users. So there should be an access review which should be conducted on a frequent basis, so that we can go ahead and validate, does that particular user still need those kind of an accesses. If yes, then it can be continued. Otherwise, those accesses can be discontinued. Then again, we can download the audit history for internal or external audit. So that audit history will contain the information about who was given the privilege access, when it was given, what was the reason behind it, and then what kind of an activity that particular user has performed when he has got that privilege roles. So this PIM is very powerful, and this give all those kind of an capabilities by which we'll be able to have a governance set around our processes. Okay, so let's see like how this PIM works. So we will take a story of Tony, who is an Iron Man. All right. So what happens is that Tony is our normal admin user. Let's say, for example, he is just the help desk admin user. So he is not any kind of an global admin. So he, as a non-global admin, requests some kind of an privileged access to perform his task. so that he can get those accesses, he can perform those tasks. So what happens is that the global admin gets that request, the global admin approves that particular request so that Tony can perform those tasks. So when the time comes, the Tony or this non-GA user gets some more privileges, gets some more access to perform the task. So now that he's an Iron Man, so that he can do anything. So Tony go ahead and then he can perform all of the accesses or all of the tasks which he was willing to do. And then what happens is that when the time bound privilege access expires, all of the accesses of Tony gets revoked. And then after that, Tony again becomes the normal admin user. He is no more global admin. So quickly, any of the admin user, he can access for the privilege access to the global admin to perform beyond his own capabilities. When the global admin approves that request, the non-global admin can go ahead and perform that task during that stipulated time frame. And once that is expires, he will again come back to the normal non-global admin kind of an role. So this is how the PIM works. So let's take a use case like how this works in the real life scenarios. So we will take a use case that admin is on leave and we need to perform some kind of an activities in the absence of admin. So firstly that let's say our global admin is going on a leave for 2 weeks, and again why he should not, because being a global admin, it's not at all needed that you should be a part of the system 24/7. So let's say he is going for a leave for 2 weeks, and again our user admin is already on leave. So what happens that this gives issue for the scenarios wherein we have new members joining the organization during the next week, and then our boss will ask who will take care of their account creation in the Azure Active Directory, right? Because we don't have global admin with us, we don't have the user admin with us. And to handle this kind of a situation, what we can do is the global admin can give those privileged accesses to any of the other admin. So during the next week, that other admin can go ahead and then perform that particular task. And then from there, he will be able to perform those tasks as well as roles. So let's take a demo of this, how it works. All right. So for that purpose, I will again go back to again I will go back to my Azure AD portal. So I'm back to my portal.azure.com. Let it load. So once you are here, probably you can just search for Azure AD Privilege Identity Management. So for example, if you don't see it in your favorites, you will be able to search it from here and just click on Azure AD Privilege Identity Management. So from here, probably you can click on My Roles, and you should be able to see all of your roles. And under the Azure AD roles, you should be able to see all of the active assignments or all of the expired assignments for that particular user. So what we are going to do now is that let's say we want to manage some kind of an access, or even we can activate just in time, and we can even discover and monitor few of the things. So before that, again, one more thing what I wanted to show you that let's say an example of this particular user who is Debra. So I will maybe duplicate this particular tab, and then from here again I will open up that particular user. So for that, let me again go back to my Azure Active Directory. Let me go to users and let me select this user who is Debra. And then if I go to the assigned roles, from here we can see all of these active assignments for this particular user. So, okay, let it load, but at least I know that this user is not global admin and he is just the help desk administrator. So let's say like we want to give some kind of an extra privileges by which this particular user will be able to add some more users to the Active Directory. So for this particular user, if I go back to the portal.azure.com, and from here, let's say, let me go open up that Azure Virtual Directory, or Okay, and from here, if I go to the users, you can see that this particular user, Debra, he is not able to add any of the new user here. So what we can do is, again, I will go back to my privilege identity management. And then from here, I will just click on manage access. And from here, under the assignments, okay, let it load. I will just click on the assignment. And from here, I will click add assignments. Okay, all right. So from here, we can select a role. So I will select user administrator here. Okay. And then we can select the member to which we want to assign this particular role. So I will click on these members, and from here I will search for that user and I will click select. And then from here I will just click on next. And from here we can give the assignment type, whether he is eligible or active. So even from here we can set it as a permanently eligible, but I don't want to do that. What I will do is, right now it is 8:16 p.m. What I will do is I will just set it to 8:18 p.m. for today only. So by default, this will give us the window of 1 year, but I just want to give it for maybe 8:22, just for 4 minutes. So I will just go ahead quickly and assign this. Okay, it's 17 now, so I will just make it as 8:19 and I will click assign. So what happens is that for that particular window only, I'm giving this particular user a rights so that he can go ahead and add any of the users to this particular organization. So with that, let me again come back to this user Debra, and then let me monitor his email. So here there should be an email soon which should say that you have got some kind of an privilege access role, which by which we will be able to perform certain operations. Okay, so right now there is still a pending request which we can see, which I can see as an admin, and from here I can see that this is the pending request for user Debra, and there should be an email here soon for this particular user Debra, right? Or at least, for example, if I just go back to the deleted items, at least this is the this kind of an email that this particular user should be able to see very soon. So what happens is that this particular user will get email something like this, to which he can view or activate the role, and from there he should be able to activate that particular role, and then he should be able to use that role for that certain duration. All right, so right now still no emails as such, but I still know like from where he will be able to see. So under this eligible assignments, he should be able to see it very quickly. All right, so it is not yet happening right now. Probably let me go back again and let me check it one more time if it is here. No, not yet. All right. So what I will do is, again, probably I will cancel this particular request. I'm just canceling this particular request, and then I will set a request one more time. So for that purpose, I will again go back to this um, identity management, and then from here I will click onto the Azure AD roles, and from here I can click on assignments, or maybe from the Azure AD, from here also you should be able to assign the assignment. So again I will click add assignment, and then from here again I can select the role. Okay, still no email, so I can go here. I can select user administrator, and then from here I can select the user as Debra again. I will select this. I will click on next. I will select this as an eligible, and I will just select it only for certain duration. So it's 8:20 here already. So what I can do is I can maybe do it for 8:23, and which can expire at maybe 8:30. can go ahead and click assign. So this role is now being assigned to that particular member, and then once that is assigned, this particular user should be able to add more users to the Active Directory. So again, I will go back to the user and I will try to see for any of the email which he is getting. If no, then what I can do is again I can search for the privilege identity management here, and then I can click on this activate, so that I should be able to see all of the eligible assignment which I have here. Unfortunately, this doesn't seem to be working for the user, because right now I don't see any email coming for this particular user. I can just see the active assignment, but this particular user should receive an email saying that you have been assigned some kind of an privileges, so that he can go ahead and then he can activate that particular role. And once it is activated, he should be able to go ahead and add the users. So, all right, so that was about the demo, like how we can configure this PIM. And then here are a few of the references if in case you want to read more about the Azure RBAC, Azure Ready PIM, how you can protect the identity and access with Azure Identity or Azure Active Directory, the module from Microsoft Learn. Before I close the session, let me again go back and see if I'm getting any of the email. But even though I'm not getting any email at this moment, this is how it works, that under this Azure Ready roles, this particular user should be able to see all those eligible assignments, and from there he can go ahead and create the users inside the organizations. All right. So, all right. So, thank you very much for having us at Cloud Lunch and Learn Marathon. Hope you like the session and see you soon.